place for the players to be. So we've tried to get that visual diversity throughout the different playfields to really create a sense of progression for the player through the different areas that they get to experience, each having a very different theme and story behind it, until they reach the final area in Pai Kang, which is a much more kind of, it was once the heart of the empire and majestic, and it's still got those kind of things, these great temples in the jungles, the kind of treetop villages and the forests, leading all the way through to the final city of Pai Kang and the Jade Citadel where the Emperor lives. So that the player will hopefully very much feel their sense of exploration of a strange land. You know, Robert E. Howard's world was a retelling of our own, whereas the original lands were more Roman, Celtic, and Egyptian inspired. Here we're talking about the Far East. And I think you can see from this footage the great way that the artists have managed to blend the two to create a very authentic Asian feel with the land. Now, especially to those guys with video cameras, this will be the first time the next section is shown to anyone outside of those players that are currently in our closed beta testing phases. But we're going to take a quick look now at some of the character creation options which are going in for the new race, because in Rise of the Godslayer, players will be able to choose a Catan character as a playable character. And with this, when we came to add the race, we're working very closely with our partners Neoviz in Korea. And this was one of the areas where we found we started to talk the most, because we are launching the game in a fully localized version in Korea later this year. And character creation was one of the first areas where we actually found that we could benefit a lot from our art teams cooperating. So the artists from Neoviz actually came over to Oslo, and some of our artists visited the Neoviz offices in Seoul. And we kind of worked out a project team working specifically on the character creation, so that we could really meld the Asian theme with the kind of dark and gritty characters. And, you know, I think anyone who's played Conan knows our characters aren't pretty boys. You know, we've got a much more realistic approach to the character creation, and we really wanted to be able to get that while still capturing the Asian theme and making sure that we could create characters that would fit both within the setting of Katai and not appear strange within the context of Age of Conan. And I think the artists have done a fantastic job of working through that and being able to create all the diverse options that you expect from character creation in this day and age. You know, I think it's gone are the days when you can have kind of 3 selections and going through. It's really important to give the players that choice, the power to choose how their character looks, and to be able to work through and choose all these very different. So here you're seeing a sequence. This is the female character creation, where we're going through and choosing some of the different selections. Not all the characters in Conan are pretty. That's probably an understatement. And then through to, you know, much more interesting and beautiful characters as well, so that we've got the full scope of choice for the player to be able to choose from when they're going through character creation. We'll also be opening up within the expansion a lot more options for our existing players to also tailor their existing characters through some options that will be available in the expansion, where they can change their appearance, their existing appearance as well. So not only will they have the option to look at new characters, they'll be able to create some interesting variation on their existing characters as well. Now, the factions, as we talked about at the beginning, are very important to the story in Rise of the Godslayer and the progression in Rise of the Godslayer. There are 10 factions, 10 main factions in the game. There are also 2 hidden ones that the players may be able to see here. What you're seeing here is some footage, just a progression through some of the different armors that are available as rewards from the factions. Now, what we've tried to do with the rewards and the incentives for the players to play through the different factions is that each of the factions has 2 very specific armor sets, each which have 4 tiers, which gave us a lot of choice. So for every single class in the game, we aim that the players should have 5 valid choices of which faction gives them an armor set that's worthwhile to them. So one might give extra DPS, one might help the health, there'll be situationally, but when they look at it as a whole, there will be 5, they're, oh, I could use that. So we're really giving them that choice. You can even see here within this faction, the Brittle Blade, the previous one and this one were both part of that faction. So even whether you use medium armor, light armor, silk armor, or the heavy armor, there are choices for you even within the factions, not just choosing between factions. There'll be choices for those players to make. Now, obviously, we've talked about the mounts quite a bit in previous presentations, so this is more a brief summary for those who may not know, but the new mounts that we'll be offering in the expansion are, they're not your stereotypical go to a vendor and buy a new mount or gain enough points to buy a new mount. In Age of Conan, in Rise of the Godslayer, you've got to do a series of quests where you pick the cub up from a very early age and you do a series of quests to progress it up till it eventually becomes a combat pet. And then if you want to take it to the final stage, you know, one of these great mounted pets where the players can use as a mount. Now, the key thing here is the player has that choice. Again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, this choice and consequence. If the player chooses to, this is the wolf mount, if the player chooses to keep it as a combat pet, they don't get to use it as a mount. They can't do both. They have to make that choice at that point. Do I want to keep it as a combat pet that can help me in gameplay, or do I turn it into a mount? Again, choice and consequence. That the player's action has meaning for their progression through the world.